The rain hammered against the broken windows of the orphanage, each drop a needle piercing the suffocating silence. Ibrahim Traoré moved through the shadows of the decaying building, his boots splashing through puddles that had formed on the cracked tile floor. The stench of mold and decay hung thick in the air, mixing with something far more sinister, the metallic tang of blood. He had received the urgent call 3 hours ago. Several children at the St. Mary's orphanage had died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. The local authorities had dismissed it as a tragic accident, perhaps food poisoning or disease. But Ibrahim knew better. In a country torn apart by civil war and corruption, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. The orphanage director had vanished. The staff had fled. Only the children remained, huddled in the great hall like frightened animals, their eyes hollow with trauma and fear. Ibrahim knelt beside a young boy, no more than 7 years old, who was trembling violently despite the warm, humid air. The child's face was streaked with tears, and his small body shook with silent sobs. Ibrahim pulled him close, feeling the rapid flutter of the boy's heartbeat against his chest. "Don't be afraid," Ibrahim whispered, his rough fingers gently wiping away the tears. "I'm here now. No one will hurt you." The boy tried to speak, his lips forming words that wouldn't come. His throat constricted with fear, and only a weak whimper escaped. Ibrahim held him tighter, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. Then, without warning, the air shattered. The crack of a rifle shot exploded through the hall, echoing off the stone walls with deafening intensity. Ibrahim felt the impact before he understood what had happened, a warm spray of blood across his face and arms, the sudden limpness of the small body in his embrace. Time seemed to freeze. The boy's eyes, which had been looking up at Ibrahim with desperate hope just seconds before, now stared at nothing. A crimson stain spread rapidly across his small chest, soaking through his tattered shirt. His thin neck went slack, and his hand slipped from Ibrahim's jacket, falling limply to the side. "No." The word tore from Ibrahim's throat, a primal sound of anguish and rage. "No!" His cry ricocheted off the crumbling walls and came back to him, mocking in its futility. Ibrahim's eyes, normally calm and calculating, transformed into burning coals of fury. He could feel something fundamental breaking inside him, a wall he had built over years of military service, of witnessing atrocities, of maintaining professional detachment. That wall crumbled in an instant. He cradled the lifeless child against his chest one final time, his fingers gently smoothing back the boy's hair. But there was no breath, no warmth, no life left to save. The small soul had been extinguished as carelessly as one might snuff out a candle. From the corners of the hall, other children began to weep, low, terrified sounds that cut through Ibrahim like knives. "Uncle," a young girl whispered, her voice trembling with mortal fear. "Will they kill us too?" Ibrahim slowly lifted his head, his grief transforming into something harder, more dangerous. His gaze fixed on a crack in the far wall, and there, barely visible in the dim light, he saw it, the glint of a rifle barrel protruding through the gap. He carefully lowered the dead child to the floor, his movements deliberate and reverent. Then he stood, his full 6'3" frame unfolding like a weapon being drawn from its sheath. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of an unbreakable vow. "No one will touch you while I draw breath." Another shot rang out, the muzzle flash illuminating the darkness for a split second. But Ibrahim was already moving. With reflexes honed by years of combat, he flipped a nearby wooden table on its side, creating a makeshift barrier. Shards of glass from a shattered pitcher scattered across the floor like deadly confetti. The remaining children scrambled behind him, pressing their small bodies against the table, seeking shelter from the storm of violence that had engulfed their sanctuary. "Show yourself!" Ibrahim's voice boomed through the hall, carrying both command and contempt. "Only cowards shoot children from the shadows, but you don't know who you're dealing with." His voice carried such conviction, such raw power, that for a moment the shooting stopped. In the silence that followed, Ibrahim heard it, the soft scraping sound of someone attempting to enter through a side door. trying to move stealthily through the darkness. His ears, sharp as a predator's, caught every sound. He placed a hand on the shoulder of the nearest child. Stay silent. Not a sound. In the orphanage hall, only one weak bulb still functioned, casting a sickly yellow light that did little to push back the encroaching darkness. The light flickered across the blood-stained floor, creating dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. Ibrahim peered around the edge of the table. A shadow moved near the door. The rifle barrel gleamed again in the faint light. Without hesitation, Ibrahim shoved the table forward and rolled behind a stone pillar, pressing himself against the cold wall. Now only two sounds remained in the hall: the muffled sobs of frightened children and the heavy footsteps of an approaching killer. Ibrahim's eyes burned with determination, and his heart held only one promise. Whoever had dared to spill innocent blood would not leave this place alive. The door creaked open. A masked figure stepped inside, his military boots crunching on broken glass with each step. The sound was sharp, deliberate, almost theatrical, as if the intruder wanted them to know he was coming. The rifle barrel swung toward the huddled children, a gesture of casual cruelty that made Ibrahim's blood boil. The children whimpered and pressed themselves smaller, trying to disappear into the shadows. Ibrahim Traoré emerged from the darkness like a striking viper. His speed defied his size. One moment he was hidden, the next he had closed the distance and grabbed the attacker's arm. The rifle jerked upward. A shot fired wildly into the ceiling, and the single working bulb exploded in a shower of glass and sparks. Complete darkness enveloped the hall. Only the sound of rain pattering through broken windows remained, along with the grunts and struggles of two men locked in mortal combat. "Who are you?" Ibrahim's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. The masked man wheezed, his breathing labored. "Get out of my way! This is beyond you!" Ibrahim twisted the attacker's wrist with brutal efficiency, forcing him to drop the weapon. It clattered on the wet floor. "Innocent children's blood is just a game to you," Ibrahim snarled. "You're following someone's orders." In the darkness, the two bodies collided and grappled. Glass crunched underfoot. The children remained frozen in terrified silence, their eyes wide and gleaming in the faint light that filtered through the windows. Suddenly, the masked man drew a knife from his jacket and lunged at Ibrahim. Metal flashed briefly in a lightning strike from outside. Ibrahim caught his wrist mid-thrust, his grip like iron. With a sharp twist, he sent the knife skittering across the floor. Then he drove the attacker backward into the wall with enough force to shake the ancient stonework. "Talk!" Ibrahim commanded, gripping the man's collar. "Who sent you?" The masked man laughed, a wet, bubbling sound that sent chills down the spines of everyone listening. "You don't understand?" he gasped. "This is part of something bigger. The orphan children are just the beginning." Ibrahim's face, already flushed with anger, darkened further. "Whatever grand plan involves murdering children, I'll destroy it here and now." The masked man suddenly spoke in a sharp, clear voice. "Alpha 7. Before Ibrahim could process the code phrase, the attacker reached into his jacket and pulled out a small explosive device. A bright flash illuminated the hall for an instant, showing everything in stark, frozen detail: the terrified children, Ibrahim's blood-splattered face, the scattered bodies of the dead. Ibrahim reacted with pure instinct. Grabbing the man's hand and forcing it upward, the explosive detonated against the ceiling. Debris, smoke, and splinters of wood rained down. The children screamed and pressed themselves flat against the floor. As the smoke began to clear, Ibrahim wrestled the attacker to the ground, pinning him with his superior weight and strength. The masked man struggled weakly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Ibrahim ripped away the mask. The face beneath made his blood run cold. This was no random terrorist or hired thug. This was a soldier, one of their own. Ibrahim recognized him from the military compound, a member of an elite intelligence unit, trusted with the nation's most sensitive security operations. Ibrahim's eyes became stones. You're one of ours." The smoke still hung in the air of the orphanage hall, mixing with the smell of gunpowder and blood. Dust particles danced in what little light remained, creating a surreal, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Ibrahim Traoré loosened his grip on the unconscious attacker, his mind reeling from the revelation. A soldier. One of their own. He quickly searched the man's clothing, his experienced hands finding pockets and hidden compartments with practiced efficiency. In an inner pocket of the jacket, his fingers closed around a folded piece of paper. He pulled it out carefully and moved toward a broken window where moonlight provided just enough illumination to see. The paper contained coded phrases and symbols, the kind used only by military intelligence units. But what drew Ibrahim's attention was the official seal at the bottom. It was stamped with the insignia of the Secret Intelligence Division, the most powerful covert unit in the country's military structure. "These are our own people," Ibrahim muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. From the corner where the children huddled, a young boy spoke up hesitantly. "Uncle, were those soldiers? I thought soldiers were supposed to protect us." Ibrahim had no immediate answer. He looked at the child's tear-stained face, at the innocent confusion in his eyes, and felt something twist painfully in his chest. "Soldiers serve the people," he finally said, his voice heavy. "But some men wear uniforms while serving only themselves. They're not soldiers, they're traitors." At that moment, the wounded attacker coughed violently, blood appearing at the corners of his mouth. Ibrahim knelt beside him. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Why are children being targeted?" The dying man's eyes flickered with a dim, fading light. He smiled slightly, a disturbing expression given his condition. "You won't be able to stop it," he wheezed. "This is just an experiment. Orders came from the top. We're all just pawns." Ibrahim grabbed his collar again, fighting the urge to shake the life out of him. "Orders from whom? Give me a name." The man took a deep, rattling breath. With his last strength, he managed 2 words: Operation Aloha. Then his head lolled to one side, and his breathing stopped. Silence descended on the hall. Outside, the rain intensified, water dripping through the damaged roof and forming small pools on the blood-stained floor. Ibrahim stood slowly, pocketing the document. He looked at the children with new determination in his eyes. "This isn't a game anymore," he said firmly. "This is war. And the first rule of war is, know your enemy." A little girl approached him timidly, still sobbing. "Uncle, you won't leave us, will you?" Ibrahim placed his hand gently on her head. "I will never abandon you, but we need to leave this place. It's not safe here anymore." He retrieved the dead attacker's rifle and moved toward the door. Peering through the broken windows, he saw lights in the distance, car headlights approaching through the darkness, multiple vehicles by the look of it. Ibrahim turned back to the children, his expression grim. "The truth is starting to emerge, but what we've uncovered is just the first clue. The real master behind all this is still out there." The rain continued to fall as Ibrahim led the children through dark alleys and abandoned streets, constantly checking over his shoulder for signs of pursuit. He couldn't take them to the usual safe houses, not when he didn't know how deep the conspiracy went or who else might be compromised. Instead, he guided them to one of the old colonial-era tunnels that ran beneath the city. Few people knew about these passages anymore. They had been built by French engineers during the occupation and then largely forgotten after independence. Ibrahim had discovered them years ago while conducting reconnaissance operations. The entrance was hidden behind a collapsed wall in an abandoned warehouse. Ibrahim pushed aside loose bricks and revealed a dark opening that descended into the earth. "Stay close," he instructed the children, "and stay quiet." They descended one by one, Ibrahim helping the smallest children down the crumbling stone steps. The air grew cooler and damper as they went deeper. Soon they were walking through a narrow tunnel, the ceiling just inches above Ibrahim's head. The walls glistened with moisture, and somewhere in the distance, water dripped with an echoing plop, plop, plop. After what felt like an eternity of walking through the darkness, guided only by Ibrahim's flashlight, they emerged into a larger chamber. Several of Ibrahim's trusted men were already there, having secured the location earlier. They had set up battery-powered lanterns that cast a warm, reddish glow across the space. "Sir," one of the soldiers approached, his young face lined with worry. Did you get them all out? Ibrahim's expression darkened. Not all. We lost. We lost too many. He briefed his men on what had happened, the attack, the revelation that military personnel were involved, the cryptic mention of Operation Aloha. As he spoke, he watched their faces carefully, looking for any sign of surprise that seemed false, any hint that one of them might also be compromised. But these were men he had served with for years, men who had saved his life and whose lives he had saved in turn. If he couldn't trust them, then trust itself had no meaning. We need to understand what we're dealing with, Ibrahim continued, spreading out the coded document on a makeshift table. This Operation Aloha, it's clearly something bigger than just killing orphans. There's a purpose behind it, a plan. One of his senior men, a grizzled veteran named Kwame, leaned over the document. These codes, they're referencing locations, supply routes. And look here, dates and times for shipments. Shipments of what? Another soldier asked. Children, Ibrahim said grimly. They're trafficking children to somewhere. The orphanage wasn't just a target, it was a source. The implications hung heavy in the air. One of the children, a girl of about 12 who had been listening quietly, spoke up. I heard them talking once, she said in a small voice. The people who came to the orphanage. They said we were valuable merchandise, that we would help make soldiers stronger. Every man in the chamber turned to look at her. Ibrahim knelt down to her level. What do you mean, make soldiers stronger? The girl's eyes welled with tears. They took blood from some of the older children. They said it was for tests. The children who had their blood taken, they got sick. Some of them died. Ibrahim felt rage building in his chest again, but he forced himself to remain calm. Did they say anything else? Any names, any places? She shook her head. Just that it was for something important. For the future of the country. Ibrahim stood and looked at his men. We need to find out where these shipments are going. If children are being used for medical experiments, that's a war crime, Kwame finished. Even in our country, even with all the corruption, this crosses every line. Which means whoever is behind it has power, Ibrahim said. Enough power to believe they're untouchable. Enough power to use military assets to cover their tracks. He thought about the dead soldier, about the official seal on the document, about the systematic way the orphanage had been targeted. We're not just fighting criminals, he realized aloud. We're fighting elements within our own government, our own military. This conspiracy goes all the way to the top. The weight of that realization settled over the group like a shroud. They were vastly outnumbered, cut off from official support, and hunted by forces that should have been on their side. One of the younger soldiers looked frightened. Sir, if that's true, we can't win. We should try to get the children out of the country, find asylum somewhere. No, Ibrahim interrupted firmly. If we run, this continues. More children die. More innocents suffer. Someone has to stand and fight, even if it kills us, the young soldier asked. Ibrahim met his eyes steadily. Especially then. Because if men like us won't die for something righteous, then what's the point of living? For several days, they remained in the underground sanctuary, venturing out only when necessary to gather supplies and information. Ibrahim sent his most trusted scouts to observe military installations, to listen for rumors, to piece together the puzzle of Operation Aloha. What they learned was disturbing. Shipments of children, always from orphanages, refugee camps, or other places where they wouldn't be missed, were being transported to a secret facility somewhere in the northern provinces. The official story, when there was one at all, claimed it was a new youth development program, a way to give unfortunate children a better future. But Ibrahim knew better. The coded documents, the secrecy, the involvement of intelligence operatives, this was no humanitarian program. Late one night, as Ibrahim was studying maps by lantern light, trying to determine the location of the facility, one of his soldiers approached nervously. Sir, I need to speak with you, privately. Ibrahim looked up at the young man. Sergeant Kofi. Barely 25 years old, but a capable soldier. What is it? Kofi glanced around to ensure no one else was listening. It's about Karim, sir. Ibrahim stiffened. Karim was one of his oldest friends, a man he had known since basic training. They had served together for over a decade. What about him?
He's been disappearing, sir.
At odd hours. And I've seen him with a radio device, something small that he keeps hidden. I wouldn't have noticed except I walked in on him once while he was using it. He shut it off quickly and acted like nothing was wrong. Ibrahim felt his heart sink. Not Kareem. Please, not Kareem. Are you certain? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Kofi wasn't the type to make baseless accusations. I wouldn't have come to you if I wasn't, sir. Ibrahim nodded slowly. Say nothing to anyone else. I'll handle this. That night, Ibrahim waited. He positioned himself in the shadows near the tunnel entrance, watching and listening. The children slept fitfully on makeshift bedding, guarded by soldiers who didn't know that one among them might be a viper. Around midnight, Ibrahim saw movement. A figure rose quietly from where the soldiers slept and moved with careful steps toward a side passage, one that led to the surface. But was supposed to be used only in emergencies. It was Kareem. Ibrahim followed silently, years of training making his footsteps soundless even on the uneven tunnel floor. He watched as Kareem entered a small alcove and pulled out a compact radio transmitter. The device's LED glowed softly red in the darkness. Kareem spoke in whispers, reporting their location, their numbers, the condition of the children. Every detail that could help their enemies find them. Ibrahim stepped into the alcove, his presence announced by the metallic click of his pistol being cocked. Hello, old friend. Kareem spun around, his face a mask of shock that quickly transformed into resignation. He didn't reach for a weapon or try to run. He simply looked at Ibrahim with sad, weary eyes. How long have you known? Kareem asked quietly. Long enough. The real question is, how long have you been betraying us? Kareem seemed to deflate, all the strength going out of him. Since the beginning. Since before the orphanage. I've been feeding them information for months. The words hit Ibrahim like physical blows. Months. All the operations that had gone wrong, all the ambushes, all the times they had been one step behind their enemies. It was because of Kareem. The children who died, Ibrahim said, his voice dangerous calm. That blood is on your hands. I know, Kareem whispered. I know, and I'll carry it forever. But Ibrahim, you don't understand. Then make me understand. Ibrahim's voice rose, echoing through the tunnel. Make me understand how you justify selling out innocents. How you live with yourself. Kareem laughed bitterly. Live with myself? I don't. I die a little every day. But I keep doing it because the alternative is worse. What alternative? They have my family, Ibrahim. My wife, my daughters. They took them 6 months ago. Said they'd kill them slowly, painfully if I didn't cooperate. What would you do in my position? Ibrahim felt some of his anger drain away, replaced by a deeper sadness. He had wondered why Kareem had stopped talking about his family, why he never went on leave anymore. Now he knew. You should have come to me, Ibrahim said. We could have helped. Could you? Could you really? These people have power you can't imagine. They have resources, connections at every level. If I had refused them, my family would have died, and they would have found someone else to be their informant. So you chose to sacrifice everyone else's family instead of your own? Kareem flinched at the accusation. I chose to survive, to keep the people I love alive. Is that so wrong? When innocents die because of that choice? Yes, it is wrong. Ibrahim stood there, gun still pointed at his oldest friend, and felt the weight of command, of duty, of justice pressing down on him. What Kareem had done was unforgivable, but he also understood the impossible choice that had been forced upon him. What happens now? Kareem asked quietly. Ibrahim thought about the children sleeping in the chamber below, about his loyal soldiers who trusted him to keep them safe, about the conspiracy they were trying to expose. Now, he said heavily, you're going to help us, really help us. You're going to feed them false information. You're going to lead them into a trap. And then maybe you can begin to atone for what you've done? Kareem looked up sharply. If they suspect for even a moment that I've turned on them, they'll kill my family. Then we'll have to make sure they don't suspect. And when this is over, we'll find your family and bring them home. You'd do that? After everything? Ibrahim lowered his weapon. You were my brother once. That has to count for something. But betray us again, betray those children, and I will put a bullet in you myself. Are we clear? Kareem nodded, tears streaming down his face. Clear. Good. Now tell me everything you know about Operation Aloha, using the information Kareem provided, along with careful disinformation to keep his handlers. Believing he was still loyal, Ibrahim and his team began to close in on the facility where the children were being taken. It was located in the northern mountains, disguised as a mining operation. The perfect cover in a region already dotted with legitimate mining camps. Trucks came and went regularly, and the heavy security could be explained away as protecting valuable mineral resources. But what they were really mining was far more sinister. Ibrahim's team spent 3 days surveilling the facility from the surrounding hills. They watched the patterns of guard rotations, noted the times when trucks arrived and departed, and mapped out every entrance and exit. On the 4th night, under cover of a violent thunderstorm that reduced visibility to almost nothing, Ibrahim led a small strike, team down the mountain toward the facility's least guarded entrance, a maintenance tunnel that Kareem had told them about. The rain hammered against them as they moved through the darkness, turning the mountain paths into treacherous rivers of mud. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating their grim faces before plunging them back into darkness. They reached the tunnel entrance, a rusty metal door set into the hillside, partially concealed by overgrown vegetation. Ibrahim's demolitions expert made quick work of the lock, and they slipped inside. The tunnel smelled of rust, mold, and something chemical that made their eyes water. They moved in single file, weapons ready, expecting resistance at any moment. But the tunnel was empty, clearly not used regularly. After several hundred meters, they reached another door. Through it, they could hear the hum of machinery, the beep of electronic equipment. This was it. Ibrahim signaled his team to ready themselves. On his count, they breached the door. The scene that greeted them would haunt Ibrahim for the rest of his life. It was a laboratory, sterile and white and horrifically modern. Rows of medical beds lined the walls, and on many of them were children. Some awake and moaning in pain, others unconscious or worse. IV lines ran from their arms to bags of fluid and machines that whirred and beeped. Along one wall were glass containers filled with substances in various colors, blood, tissue samples, and things Ibrahim couldn't immediately identify. Everything was labeled with codes and numbers, reducing the children to mere experimental subjects. "My God!" one of Ibrahim's soldiers whispered. A man in a white lab coat looked up at the sound of the breach, his eyes widening in shock. He reached for an alarm button, but Ibrahim was faster. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides and grabbed the scientist by the throat. "Don't!" Ibrahim growled. The man's hands came up in surrender, and Ibrahim's team quickly secured the room, ensuring no other personnel were present. They found 2 more scientists in an adjacent room, along with detailed records of what had been done to the children. The files made for grim reading. The children had been subjected to blood extraction, tissue sampling, and injection with experimental compounds. The goal, according to the meticulous notes, was to develop a serum that would enhance soldiers' physical capabilities, strength, endurance, aggression. They were trying to create super soldiers, and they were using orphaned children as raw materials. Many of the early test subjects had died. Those who survived were often left with severe side effects, seizures, organ failure, psychological breakdowns. The scientists noted these results with clinical detachment, showing no more emotion than if they were testing chemicals on rats. Ibrahim wanted to kill them all right then. His finger tightened on his trigger, and it would have been so easy. 3 quick shots, and these monsters would never hurt another child. But he forced himself to lower his weapon. Dead men couldn't testify. Dead men couldn't expose the conspiracy. "Secure them," he ordered his team. "We're taking them alive. The world needs to see what's being done here." His soldiers began freeing the children who could be moved, gathering the files and evidence, preparing to evacuate. But they had been inside the facility for less than 10 minutes when alarms began to blare. "They know we're here!" Kwame shouted over the wailing sirens. Ibrahim had known this was a possibility. Their luck had been good, but not good enough. "Stick to the plan," he commanded. "Get the children out through the maintenance tunnel. I'll create a diversion." "Sir, we can't leave you." "That's an order, soldier. Get them out." As his team began herding the confused, frightened children toward the exit, Ibrahim ran in the opposite direction, toward the main entrance of the facility. He fired his weapon at cameras and equipment as he went, making as much noise as possible, drawing attention to himself. Guards poured into the corridor ahead of him. Ibrahim took cover behind a steel doorframe and returned fire. The confined space worked to his advantage. They couldn't bring overwhelming numbers to bear all at once, but he couldn't hold them forever. He just needed to buy enough time for the children to escape. The firefight was brutal and desperate. Ibrahim emptied one magazine, then another, his training taking over as conscious thought became impossible in the chaos of combat. Bullets sparked off metal walls around him. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled his lungs. Then, over the sound of gunfire, he heard it, an explosion from outside the facility. His team had set charges on the main generator as planned. The lights flickered and died, plunging everything into darkness broken only by emergency lighting. In the confusion, Ibrahim ran. He sprinted back the way he had come, retracing his steps through the maintenance tunnel. Behind him he could hear shouting, the sounds of pursuit. His lungs burned, and his legs felt like lead, but he pushed himself harder. He emerged from the tunnel into the thunderstorm, rain immediately soaking him to the skin. Somewhere ahead in the darkness were his team and the rescued children. He just had to reach them, but as he ran down the muddy hillside, his foot caught on something, a root, a rock. He never knew what. He fell hard, tumbling down the slope, rocks and branches tearing at his clothes and skin. He came to rest in a shallow ravine, dazed and hurting. For a moment he simply lay there, rain falling on his upturned face, wondering if this was where it would end. Then strong hands grabbed him, pulled him up. Quame's face appeared above him, barely visible in the darkness. "I've got you, sir. Come on." Together they stumbled through the storm, finally reaching where the rest of the team waited with the children. They had prepared a vehicle, an old truck they had stolen days earlier, and everyone piled in. As they drove away from the facility, Ibrahim looked back at the lights in the distance. They had struck a blow against the conspiracy, rescued some of the children, and obtained evidence of the atrocities. But he knew this was far from over. Whoever was behind Operation Aloha would not simply accept this defeat. They would regroup, adapt, and come back stronger. The real war was just beginning. In the days following the laboratory raid, Ibrahim's team went into deep hiding. They had moved the rescued children to a safe location, a church in a remote village whose priest could be trusted. The evidence they had gathered was copied multiple times and distributed to different hiding spots. Now came the hardest part, figuring out who was ultimately responsible. The documents from the laboratory had contained names and code designations, but most were mid-level operatives. The true mastermind remained hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and plausible deniability. Ibrahim was studying the files for perhaps the 100th time when Kwame burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Sir, we've caught a break. One of the scientists we captured is willing to talk." They had been keeping the captured lab personnel in a secure location, separating them so they couldn't coordinate stories. So far, all had refused to cooperate beyond confirming what was already obvious from the documents. What changed his mind? Ibrahim asked. His conscience, apparently, or fear. Hard to tell which. The scientist, a thin man in his 50s named Dr. Mensah, looked haggard and defeated when Ibrahim entered the room where he was being held. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and his hands trembled. "I want immunity," were his first words. "You're in no position to negotiate," Ibrahim replied coldly. "Then kill me, because if they find out I talked, I'm dead anyway. At least if you kill me, it will be quick." Ibrahim pulled up a chair and sat down, studying the man. "Tell me what you know. Convince me you deserve to live." Dr. Mensah swallowed hard. "The operation. It's been running for almost 3 years. It started small, just theoretical research into human enhancement. But then someone high up in the government saw the military applications. They wanted super soldiers who could turn the tide in the Civil War." "Who? Give me a name." "I never met him directly. None of us did. He worked through intermediaries. But we all knew the code name, the Minister. Which Minister? Defense? Interior? I don't know. That's the truth. The layers of secrecy were absolute. But I know he has reach into every level of government and military. That's how he's been able to operate with impunity. Ibrahim leaned forward. What about Operation Aloha specifically? What does it mean? Dr. Mensah looked genuinely confused. I don't know that designation. My work was just on the serum development. The broader strategic planning was handled elsewhere. Then what can you tell me? What haven't I already learned from the files? The scientist hesitated, then spoke in a rush, as if afraid he would lose his courage. There's another facility, bigger than the one you raided. That was just a testing site. The main production facility is somewhere else. Ibrahim's pulse quickened. Where? I don't know exactly, but I overheard one of the security officers mention it was near the capital, close to the seat of power, which makes sense if the minister is who I think he is. And who do you think he is? Dr. Mensah met Ibrahim's eyes. I think he's the deputy defense minister. General Kofi Ajay. The name hit Ibrahim like a physical blow. General Ajay was one of the most powerful men in the country, a war hero who had helped put down the initial rebellion years ago. He was respected, feared, and absolutely ruthless. If Ajay was behind this, you're sure? Ibrahim demanded. Not completely, but I saw his aide once at the facility. And certain things that were said, certain references, it all points to him. Ibrahim stood and paced the small room. If this was true, then they were facing an enemy who could mobilize the full might of the state against them. They would be declared traitors, terrorists, enemies of the nation. Every soldier, every police officer would be hunting them. Thank you, Dr. Mensah, Ibrahim finally said. You'll remain in custody, but I'll see that you're protected. As he left the room, his mind was already racing through the implications. They needed more proof before they could move against someone as powerful as General Ajay, but they also couldn't wait too long. Every day that passed meant more children in danger. Ibrahim called an emergency meeting with his core team. In the dim underground chamber, lit by flickering lanterns, he laid out what they had learned. If it's really General Ajay, we're completely outgunned, one soldier said, voicing what everyone was thinking. He commands thousands of troops. We're what, 20 men? Maybe 30 if we count everyone? Numbers don't matter if we're smart, Ibrahim countered. We have something he doesn't, the truth. And the element of surprise. He thinks we're just troublemakers, rebels causing problems. He doesn't know how much we know. Kwame leaned forward. What are you thinking, sir? We draw him out. Make him show his hand. Right now, he operates in shadows, with layers of protection. We need to force him into the light. How? Ibrahim smiled grimly. We give him exactly what he wants us, but on our terms. Over the next several hours, they formulated a plan. Using Kareem's communication channel to the enemy, they would feed false information suggesting Ibrahim's team was planning to attack a government building in the capital. They would make it look like a desperate terrorist act, the kind of thing that would require General Ajay's personal attention to contain. But in reality, it would be a trap. While Ajay's forces were concentrated on the supposed attack site, Ibrahim's team would hit the main production facility that Dr. Mensah had mentioned. They would gather irrefutable evidence of what was being done there, and more importantly, they would broadcast it to the world. It's risky, Kwame said. If anything goes wrong, everything's risky at this point, Ibrahim interrupted. But doing nothing is riskier. Every day we wait, more children suffer. The team spent the next 2 days preparing. They gathered what weapons and equipment they could, planned escape routes, and most importantly, they set up a dead man's switch. If anything happened to them, the evidence they had already collected would automatically be sent to every major news organization, human rights group, and foreign embassy they could think of. On the appointed night, Ibrahim divided his forces. A small diversionary team would create the appearance of the threatened attack in the capital, drawing security forces away from the real target. Meanwhile, Ibrahim would lead the main assault on the production facility. As they prepared to move out, one of the rescued children, a girl named Amara who had attached herself to Ibrahim, tugged on his sleeve. "You're coming back, right?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. Ibrahim knelt down and took her small hands in his. "I promise I'll do everything in my power to come back." But Amara, if something happens to me, I need you to be brave. Can you do that? She nodded, though tears were already forming in her eyes. Good girl. Now stay here with Sister Margaret. She'll take care of you. He stood and looked at his team, men who had become brothers through shared danger and shared purpose. Some of them would not survive the night. They all knew it. But not one of them suggested backing out. Gentlemen, Ibrahim said, his voice carrying quiet authority. Whatever happens tonight, know that you've already made a difference. Those children we saved, they have a future because of you. That means something. They moved out into the night, shadows among shadows, warriors fighting a war that most people didn't even know existed. The production facility was located in an industrial park on the outskirts of the capital, masquerading as a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant. It even had legitimate operations running as cover. Several floors of the building really did produce medicines and vaccines. But in the basement levels, accessible only through secured elevators and guarded checkpoints, the real work was being done. Ibrahim's team approached from multiple directions, using the darkness and their knowledge of security patterns to get close. They had divided into 3 fire teams, each with a specific objective. One to secure the evidence, one to hold off reinforcements, and one, Ibrahim's team, to confront whoever was running the operation. At precisely 11:47 p.m., they breached the facility. The first few minutes went smoothly. Too smoothly. The guards they encountered seemed surprised, unprepared. Ibrahim's teams moved through the building with practiced efficiency, clearing rooms and moving deeper into the complex. But when they reached the basement levels, everything changed. The elevator doors opened onto a scene of organized chaos. Scientists and technicians were frantically destroying files, smashing equipment, clearly having been warned of the intrusion. But by whom? Freeze! Ibrahim shouted, but several of the personnel ignored him, continuing their destruction. His team fanned out, trying to stop the destruction while securing the area. But they were too late to save most of it. Computer drives had been wiped, documents shredded, evidence destroyed, all except one room. At the far end of the basement was a heavy steel door, still sealed. Ibrahim's breaching team blew it open, and inside they found a pristine laboratory untouched by the destruction. And in the center of the room, sitting calmly in a leather chair, was General Kofi Adjei himself. He was a large man, still powerful despite being in his 60s, with gray hair and cold, calculating eyes. He looked at Ibrahim without surprise or fear, merely with mild interest. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the general said, his voice deep and cultured. I've heard a great deal about you. You've been quite the nuisance. Ibrahim raised his weapon, aiming at the general's chest. It's over, sir. We have enough evidence to expose what you've been doing. Adjei smiled. Do you? I'm afraid most of that evidence has just been destroyed, and what little remains will be dismissed as fabrications by a terrorist cell. You see, that's what you are now, terrorists. That's what the news will say when they report your deaths. We have witnesses, survivors, children you experimented on, children who are traumatized and unreliable. Who will believe them over a decorated general? Over official government statements? Adjei stood, moving to a small table where several glasses and a bottle of expensive scotch sat. He poured himself a drink with steady hands. You've lost, Captain. You just don't know it yet. Then why are you still here? Ibrahim challenged. Why not flee? Because I want you to understand. Adjei took a sip of his drink. What we were doing here, yes, it was brutal. Yes, innocent lives were lost. But it was necessary. This country is tearing itself apart. We're weak, divided. The serum we were developing could have changed everything. Super soldiers who could restore order, who could make us strong again. By sacrificing children, by doing what needed to be done. For the first time, emotion crept into Adjei's voice. Soldiers die in war. That's expected, but we keep losing because we're not strong enough, not ruthless enough. I was trying to give us an advantage, to save this nation. Ibrahim shook his head. You're insane. You've convinced yourself that mass murder is patriotism. History is written by winners, Captain. If I had succeeded, I would be a hero. Instead, because of you, I'll be a villain. But the irony is, you'll never be able to prove it. My people have already destroyed the evidence, and in about... He checked his watch. 3 minutes. This facility will be surrounded by loyal troops who have been told you're here to assassinate me. They'll kill you and all your men, and that will be the end of your little rebellion. As if on cue, Ibrahim heard the sound of vehicles screeching to a halt outside the building, shouted orders, the clatter of many boots on stairs. Kwame appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we're surrounded. At least 100 soldiers, maybe more." Ibrahim kept his weapon trained on Ajay. "It doesn't matter. We're not here to escape. We're here to expose you." "With what evidence?" Ajay laughed. "You have nothing." Ibrahim smiled then, a cold, hard expression. "We have you. This conversation has been transmitted to every news outlet in the country. Your confession, your arrogance, all of it. Live feed, General. The whole nation is hearing you right now." Ajay's face went pale. His eyes darted to Ibrahim's vest, where a small camera was pinned. Something that looked like standard tactical equipment, but was actually broadcasting everything. "You're bluffing," Ajay said. But his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Ibrahim tapped his earpiece. "Kwame, confirm transmission." "Confirmed, sir. Signal is strong. Multiple outlets have already started broadcasting it." The general's composure finally cracked. His hand shook as he set down his glass, scotch sloshing over the rim. You've destroyed everything. Years of work, strategic planning." "I've destroyed nothing but your evil plan," Ibrahim interrupted. "The nation will survive. Those children will survive, but you're finished." Ajay's face transformed from shock to rage. In one swift movement, he pulled a pistol from inside his jacket and fired, but Ibrahim was faster. His bullet caught the general in the shoulder, spinning him around. The general's shot went wide, shattering a glass cabinet behind Ibrahim. Ajay collapsed against the table, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "It doesn't matter," he gasped. "Even now. My men are coming. They'll kill you all. You'll be martyrs, but dead martyrs." "Maybe," Ibrahim said. "But the truth is out there now. We've already won." The sounds of soldiers breaching the building grew louder. Ibrahim's team took up defensive positions, ready for the last stand. But then something unexpected happened. The sounds of aggression changed to confusion. Ibrahim heard shouting, but not the coordinated commands of an assault. These were arguments, questions. The sounds of orders being questioned. One of Ibrahim's scouts, who had been monitoring communications, reported, "Sir." The soldiers outside, they're listening to the broadcast. They're hearing what the general did. Some of them are refusing to attack. There's chaos in their command structure. Hope flared in Ibrahim's chest. Could it be possible? The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. During that time, more and more of the soldiers outside heard the broadcast, learned the truth about Operation Aloha, about the murdered children, about their general's crimes. And one by one, they laid down their weapons. When Ibrahim finally emerged from the building, hands raised to show he was unarmed, he was greeted not by gunfire but by silence. Hundreds of soldiers stood in the courtyard, their weapons lowered, their faces reflecting shock and betrayal. A young lieutenant stepped forward. "Captain Traoré, we didn't know. We were told you were terrorists, that you were trying to destabilize the government. But we heard the broadcast. We heard what the general said." Ibrahim looked at the young man, saw his own past reflected there. A soldier trying to do right in a corrupt system. "I know you were following orders. That's what soldiers do. But sometimes the orders are wrong. And when that happens, we have a duty to something higher than the chain of command." The lieutenant nodded slowly. "What happens now? Now we make sure this never happens again. We find all the children who were taken. We expose everyone involved, no matter how high up they are. And we rebuild, on a foundation of truth instead of lies." The weeks following the exposure of Operation Aloha were chaotic. General Ajay survived his wound and was taken into custody, along with dozens of other conspirators. The government, desperate to avoid being seen as complicit, launched a full investigation, though Ibrahim suspected they were more interested in containing the damage than finding all the truth. But the public outcry was too strong to completely suppress. Mass protests demanded accountability. Foreign governments, embarrassed by their ignorance or complicity, applied pressure. Human rights organizations descended on the country, documenting the atrocities. All the surviving children from the experiments were found and reunited with whatever family they had or placed in legitimate care facilities. Medical treatment was provided, though some of the damage done to them could never be fully healed. Ibrahim himself became something of a reluctant hero. People stopped him on the streets to shake his hand to thank him. Journalists wanted interviews. Politicians wanted to be seen with him. He hated all of it. Because for every child they had saved, he remembered the ones they hadn't. The little boy who had died in his arms at the orphanage. The ones who had perished in the laboratories before they could be rescued. The ones whose bodies were found in unmarked graves near the facilities. One evening, Ibrahim sat on a bench in a small park in the capital, trying to find some peace. Amara, the little girl who had attached herself to him, sat beside him, eating an ice cream cone, a treat that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. "Uncle Ibrahim," she said between licks, "are the bad men all gone now?" He wanted to tell her yes, that they were safe, that nothing bad would ever happen again. But he had promised himself he would never lie to her. "Some of them are gone," he said carefully. "But there will always be bad people in the world, Amara. The important thing is that there are also good people who will fight against them. Like you, like all of us. You don't have to be a soldier to fight for what's right. You just have to have courage and compassion." She thought about this for a moment, then nodded seriously. "Then I'm going to be a fighter too. When I grow up, I'm going to help people like you helped me." Ibrahim felt tears prick his eyes. "I think you'll be magnificent." Kwame approached, his footsteps deliberate to announce his presence. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." Ibrahim looked up to see a woman in her 40s, well-dressed and professional-looking, accompanied by two young girls. It took him a moment to recognize her, Kareem's wife, and those were his daughters. The woman approached hesitantly. "Captain Traoré? I'm Abina, Kareem's wife. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" Ibrahim asked, genuinely confused. "For saving us. For giving my husband a chance to redeem himself. The night of the raid, while you were at the facility, Kareem used his communications access to locate where we were being held. He sent in an anonymous tip to police and we were rescued. He died helping you expose the conspiracy, but he died trying to make things right." Ibrahim stood, shocked. He hadn't known. In the chaos of the raid, Kareem had been killed by General Ajay's security forces. Ibrahim had assumed he died fighting, but apparently there was more to the story. He was a good man who made a terrible choice under impossible circumstances, Ibrahim said. But in the end, he chose right. "That's what matters." Abina's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for fighting for those children. For fighting for all of us." As she left with her daughters, Ibrahim sat back down, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle on his shoulders. They had won a victory, yes, but the cost had been high, and the fight was far from over. 6 months after the fall of Operation Aloha, Ibrahim stood before a classroom of young military cadets at the National Academy. He had been asked to give a lecture on ethics and moral courage in the armed forces, a topic that, before recent events, would have been covered in a single cursory session, if at all. Now it was a centerpiece of their training. "You're all here because you want to serve your country," Ibrahim began, looking out at the young, eager faces. "That's noble. But service means more than just following orders. It means having the courage to question those orders when they conflict with basic human decency." He told them about the orphanage, about the children who died, about the conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. He didn't spare them the details. They needed to understand what evil looked like, how it could disguise itself as patriotism and duty. Some of you are thinking, "That won't happen to me." "I'll know evil when I see it," Ibrahim continued. But it's never that simple. Evil rarely announces itself. It comes disguised as necessity, as the hard choices that leaders have to make. It asks for small compromises at first, then larger ones, until you wake up one day and realize you've become the monster you swore to fight against. A cadet raised her hand. "Sir, how do we prevent that? How do we stay on the right path?" Ibrahim smiled. That's the right question. And the answer is, you can't do it alone. You need allies, people you trust who will call you out when you start to drift. You need to maintain connections to the people you're supposed to serve, civilians, not just other soldiers. And you need to remember always that your ultimate loyalty is not to any commander or government, but to the ideals that make us human. After the lecture, as Ibrahim walked across the academy grounds, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The country was changing. Slowly, painfully, but changing nonetheless. New leadership had been elected, promising transparency and accountability. Laws were being passed to prevent the kind of abuse that had enabled Operation Aloha. It wasn't perfect. There were still corrupt officials, still systemic problems, but it was progress, and the children who had survived were healing. Not all of them, not completely, but they were getting help, building new lives. Amara was attending school now, and she had started to smile again, really smile, not the forced expression of a traumatized child pretending to be okay. Ibrahim's phone rang. It was the new defense minister, a woman who had been a vocal critic of the old regime. "Captain Traoré," she said when he answered, "I have a proposition for you. We're creating a new oversight division, responsible for investigating corruption and human rights abuses within the military. I want you to lead it." Ibrahim paused, considering. It would mean staying in the military, continuing the fight from within the system rather than outside it. Part of him wanted to refuse, to walk away from all of it and try to find some peace. But then he thought about those children, about Amara's question. Are the bad men all gone now? They weren't. There would always be new threats, new evils to fight. Someone had to stand against them. "I accept," Ibrahim said. "On one condition: I have complete autonomy. No political interference, no matter where an investigation leads." The minister laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you. When can you start?" "Tomorrow." As he ended the call, Ibrahim looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and red. It reminded him of the fire from that night at the facility, but also of dawn, of new beginnings. He thought about the little boy who had died in his arms, about all the victims who hadn't survived to see justice done. He couldn't bring them back, but he could honor their memory by ensuring their deaths meant something, by fighting to prevent others from suffering the same fate. "This is for you," he whispered to the ghosts that followed him. "All of this is for you." And with renewed purpose, Ibrahim Traoré walked forward into whatever battles awaited him, ready to face them with the same courage and conviction that had brought him this far. The war against evil was never really over. But as long as there were people willing to fight it, there was always hope. The end in memory of all those who have suffered at the hands of those who were meant to protect them, and in honor of those who find the courage to stand against injustice, no matter the cost.